Alrighty, welcome to episode 4 of BM by BM. This episode will be discussing Gattaca.
Indeed.
Yes.
Melinda, I'm coming to you from a new location. I
Mm.
don't know if you noticed. It's mostly for my own safety. So, anyway, carry on. I'm ready.
Good. So,
Discussing
Gattaca. Yes.
You want to run us through the plot of Gattaca real quick? An overview. No spoilers.
No spoilers. Okay, so I don't know if it's their first movie together, but Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman star in it alongside Jude Law. So basically, everyone genetically modifies their babies, but Ethan Hawke was conceived and born naturally. And then he also has a brother. But Ethan Hawke wants to go to Titan, which is it's one of some planet's moons. But anyway, he basically fakes his way into Gattaca in order to go to the moon. And he does this through using Jude Law's skin flakes, blood, hair, all the things.
So just to expand a little bit for our viewers who have not seen Gattaca, in society, genetic profiling is of utmost importance. Not only do parents decide what their children the genetic makeup of their children will be before they're born, those determinations, there's, you would say, genetic, we would call it discrimination. They would call it caution. Mm-hmm. So not only do you ensure that your child does not have any congenital defects, as, by the way, is currently far more readily available today than it was when the movie was released.
1997.
Yes. But there's also such things as predictions about the lifespan of individuals based on their DNA and their genetics. So he is essentially using his own DNA, severely restricted on the career and job opportunities he has, and genetic testing is not strictly required, but they're going to get your DNA and make employment decisions based on that. So
right.
Jude's character is someone who has excellent DNA, but for whatever reason will otherwise be discriminated against. In his case, he had a catastrophic accident that makes him basically physically disabled, but his genes, his DNA is so valuable that he essentially sells his identity and becomes a symbiotic donor. So he is cared for and well paid in exchange for providing his DNA on an ongoing basis, because you can't use old skin cells and hair. You have to use current samples.
Mm-hmm. Right. The movie starts with like when he's first born, they do a test where they do a prick on the heel, which, I mean, they do that now as having a child a year ago. They do that to test for diseases right when the baby's born at a certain amount of time. But in Gattaca, after they do the prick and they put it in the machine, there's a printout which basically gives mental illness percentage of a possible mental say the word, what words? Probability. Yeah. But for all different types of diseases, whether it's heart disease, mental illness, different things, but it also gives a life expectancy for that child. And his life expectancy was like 30.5 years.
Right. So a couple of connections. This is actually, I didn't read my history well enough to know if Apollo 13 portrayed this correctly, but there's a little bit of a tie into the risk of illness. So one of the astronauts in Apollo 13 was bumped because they were at supposedly at higher risk of getting sick, but then the astronaut that actually went got sick, and the one who didn't did not. So, just pointing out that even these kinds of predictions um, may be useful on the macro level, on the when making predictions for very large populations of humans, but it's very, very difficult to be that accurate when you're making predictions for a single human.
Mm-hmm.
So, not to give too much away, but one of the two of us may have watched this movie today and maybe still engaged in some visceral reactions to it.
Mm-hmm.
Would that person care to share any of those reactions?
Well, so the whole idea for this channel and these episodes came from a graphic that you shared. And I think the conversation kind of spurred from Gattaca because there was a device that was found. I mean, not a device that was found. There was this process of genetically modifying DNA, which is called CRISPR, and is at work today. I remember hearing stuff about it on NPR a couple of years ago, but now it's becoming more and more centralized into genetically modifying humans as opposed to using it for research purposes for animals or whatever. I don't know. But there was a doctor in China who was jailed last year for creating genetically modified fetuses. And I think there were two quotes at the beginning of the film. One of them was Ecclesiastes, and I don't remember the quote. But the second one, it was from someone, and it said basically, like, I think Mother Nature wants us to toy with nature. And it's just very scary and not far-fetched that this is happening now. One of my other things that I wanted to talk about with CRISPR is it's it's one of the plot lines of the movie Rampage with The Rock, which was a video game and they made into a movie. But CRISPR talking about genetically modified animals, changing their DNA and melding them into different creatures or making them larger. But I mean, this is much more a reality now than in the past. So it's weird.
But what about the skeptics out there who are huge fans of our show, and they both think that this is quite a reach to think that the party or Big Brother even has access to our DNA? What connections do we make there? So I would propose that a lot of so there's this theory. Perhaps we can discuss it a little bit more later. But basically, about 15 years ago, there's this article written that basically, or longer than that, I'm sorry, that says we should be really cautious about our undying praise and admiration for the advance of technology. That every advance includes a cost, and that if you can't see a cost or a downside to a technology, that just means the cost is not where you can see. There is a cost somewhere. And just because an example of that is we are, so we have the ability to connect with others. So a show like this allows us to stream live from a distance to people who may be watching in lots of different places.
Mm-hmm.
But a thing that is lost is just a thing that comes to mind immediately is the ability of others to have any kind of exclusivity to streaming, for example, or there's the loss of course, we're very worried about loss of privacy or things like that.
Right.
So anyway, we'll discuss that more later, and maybe recommend that article to read at another time. But right now, the reason I was bringing that up is to draw this connection to this idea of our DNA and the advancement in technology. Also, technology does not announce itself as scary. The fear and the underbelly of this is always a trailing concern. So you may have heard of some of the popular companies that say, if you send us your DNA, we will tell you things about yourself that you want to know. Things like who were your progenitors, or it could be a health thing. We can tell you about your health panel or your DNA profile, and we willingly act. We don't even consent. We pay to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been cases where um, law enforcement has demanded access to those records, and it's not a large step to imagine either security breaches or a change in laws or processes that would allow all of that stored data to be accessed by, doesn't have to be government type organizations. It could be individuals or corporations or any number of things like that. So
right.
Essentially, I guess the point it's taking me several minutes to make is that a lot of the technologies described in the movie have developed since the time the movie was made, and the only question is to be determined is are the scenarios where they are used in that way.
Right. I guess right now it depends on what job you have. Because I mean, as teachers, we have criminal background checks with our fingerprints.
Right.
But it's not quite a pinprick to get your blood taken in order to approve of yourself. Yet. But also, what did they do with everyone's blood in Gattaca? Like instead of like a turnstile thing in order to get in, they have to put their finger on and get a pinprick and then go in. So
right.
I don't know.
Right. Very interesting. So strong takeaways here for you?
It was interesting, again, to see the technology that we currently have in use that could be used against you. Like, he talked about how even a voluntary drug testing could get your DNA and be used against you in a job interview. So it's not that far out of the realm of possibility of happening. But, and I don't want to say my takeaway is aim low, try to get a job that doesn't do that, but I don't know. I don't know what jobs will in the future.
Deny you access if you, let's be careful here, but let's do a little thinking. I don't know if anybody out there knows this, but the universe we're living in is experiencing a little thing we call a pandemic. And the ability to medically address the pandemic is trailing. Let's just run some scenarios. What happens if we get to a place where this is just the beginning and exposure to and previous infection by this particular disease turns out to be very, very dangerous moving forward? Hypothetically, in that again, very much a hypothetical here, everyone. Don't panic. It's not War of the Worlds. But in that situation, I think initially everyone would be on board with saying folks who have been infected should not be allowed to hold jobs where they may further infect others. So right there, we're okay with that. That's the path you step on. Where does that path lead you?
Mm-hmm.
And which jobs would not be impacted by such a decision? So anyway, today it's much easier for me to imagine scenarios where a decision about one's employment and freedom of movement could be made based on a DNA panel that is extracted very quickly, like it is in the movie.
Right. Yeah.
God willing, that is nothing like what will happen. But that's why we have this show, to ponder the what ifs.
What ifs? Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, there's some housework being done there by a great person, or is that on my end? I'm hearing dishwashing.
Yes.
What a guy.
Yes, what a guy.
Shout out to that guy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What's on tap for next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, we have A Clockwork Orange, which unfortunately, when I downloaded it on Overdrive through my library, I think it was in Swedish, but I found another version that's in English. So
we're discussing the book?
Yes, the book, A Clockwork Orange. Okay. And then I'm not sure what is the movie for Friday, but we'll figure it out.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Well, as always, great conversation.
Yes.
You're out here in the toilet paper business. We're still waiting for you to call. All 5 of our fans would love to hear a pitch for really any brand. We're open to any right now. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, thanks everyone for your support.
Yes. Alrighty. See you on Tuesday, everybody.
See you guys.
Stay safe.
Yes.
Hold on to your skin cells.